Hello, everybody. This is the Body Image Panel, Body Talk, I titled it, for Comic-Con at Home. So welcome, Comic-Con at Home people. We have a really, really lovely panel of folks today, and a conversation that I hope everyone will really, be able to take something positive and thoughtful away from, which I definitely know from these panelists is going to happen. So I'm Mariah McCourt. I'm an editor and writer, and I'm just going to take it into introducing our panelists right away. So first we have Andrea.
Hey, so I'm Andrea Schockling, and I have been working on a project called Subjective Line Weight for the past 3 years, where I talk to women about their bodies, and they share the stories that we're not really supposed to talk about. Sometimes it's about weight and the feeling that you have when you gain weight or lose weight, especially unexpectedly. Sometimes it's about reproductive issues. Sometimes it's about transition stories. I've talked to a number of women, and those stories then get adapted and edited into comics and shared online. The project itself has evolved over the years, but it's really important to me that we have some kind of forum to address some of these conversations that don't happen very often, especially intersections of the body conversation in terms of gender roles, influences of like family dynamics or relationship dynamics, or just a variety of different experiences, and looking at comics as a way to provide a venue for some of those feelings that we all have about our bodies, but don't often get a chance to share.
I've been very lucky to participate in that, doing a poem, and Andrea did an amazing art adaptation with stretch marks and things for post-pregnancy body stuff that was really amazing. It was an incredible thing to see, and I was very moved. All right, so next person is Jules.
It's me, Jules Rivera. Hi. So the reason I ended up on this panel is because I made a graphic novel. Well, this is actually the second graphic novel of my webcomic, Love Jules. This is Love Jules, Tidal Wave Queen. And literally the back of the book is, so I started a revolution with my ass. And that's, the most important thing you need to know about me. Look, I'm a woman who is pear-shaped, all right? And for the longest time in this society, I felt like, that was a bad thing. Then I got divorced and got on the dating scene, and it turns out, yeah, nobody's upset about my giant butt. And I'm like, more people need to celebrate this. So I do it in comics form. I do it partially to be obnoxious, but also partially to make everybody aware of how great big round booties are. It's important. I am the butt advocate. Nobody in comics has better butts than, okay, maybe there might be a couple people, but I'm like in the top 5.
Jules, I love you. All right, and Lila.
Jules is a hard act to follow, not gonna lie. I'm gonna do my best. I'm Lila Sturgis. I am a comic book writer. I'm also a transgender woman, which is germane to this conversation because the intersection of transness and body awareness is a complex one. And it's a really fascinating conversation that I like to have. And I did a story with Andrea for Subjective Line Weight, and it was a really wonderful experience. I write books like Lumberjanes, The Infernal Compass, and The Magicians, Alice's Story. And my work primarily focuses on women, queer people, and creating environments where queer identities are validated and normalized.
And I love you too, Lila. Thank you for coming on the panel. Yeah. All right, and Mari, I believe you're next up.
Hi, I'm Mari Naomi. I've been drawing autobio comics since 1997. I've drawn myself naked quite a bit, and I feel like not part of the reason, but one thing I get out of drawing autobio comics and drawing myself hundreds and thousands of times is I am constantly reevaluating what I look like, because I'm completely body dysmorphic. I have no idea what I look like at any point in time. I feel like that's what selfies are for, and drawing myself is for. And in addition to that, I think maybe this is why I was invited to this panel, is because I did these fiction books, Life on Earth, where I draw each character from their own perspective, and each chapter from a different perspective. A character might look different depending on what that person's idealization of that initial character might be. And also I am the administrator and curator of the Cartoonists of Color, Disabled Cartoonist Database, and Queer Cartoonist Database. And that's about it for me.
That's all. That's just a little bit. Just a tiny bit. I guess that brings it to me. I'll keep it pretty brief. Mariah McCourt. I've been writing and editing comics for about 20 years now. I also, like Mari, have body dysmorphia, and I used to have an eating disorder for years. And it's a particular topic that interest isn't really the right word, but that concerns me, especially for younger people, and the intersection of how much that relates to how people view themselves in the world and their value and their worth. And so that's really why I wanted to do this panel. Is I think it's always a valuable conversation to have about how we're relating in media and what we're seeing, what representation looks like and feels like to all of us. And I want to give a special shout out to Casey Gilly, who has done a panel like this before several times at Emerald City and a couple other conventions, somebody who cares a great deal about this subject too. I wanted to make sure I mentioned that because I know she's done a lot of work in this space. So that's sort of where this has come from. And I'm hoping everybody here feels like they can have a really strong voice about this today in this panel. So Sequoia, I think that segues to you.
All right. Well, my name is Sequoia Bostic. I'm a freelance illustrator. I am mostly multiple disciplinary in terms of like, you know, what's the kind of art that I make. But I do comics as well. I do an autobio comic called The Crap Book. There's a little mini version of it. And it's like pretty much just autobio stories starting from high school on up to adulthood, which I think is pretty fun. I also run a all ages anthology called Vagabond Comics. So this is our newest issue, the 2020 issue. So it kind of came at a great time in terms of like the stories that we have in there. So some of it talks about COVID, some of it talks about just like what they want the future to be in terms of, you know, being an artist or being a human being in this day and age. But also I think I'm really interested to hear more on this panel. I'm here to learn. So I want to learn a lot of it, which would be pretty fun. Like when I do characters in my comics, it's usually, you know, Black female characters, and they're usually the main characters and in the forefront. So yeah, good research.
And you do teaching as well, don't you? You do workshops and stuff, which I was seeing on your site, which look really amazing with younger artists and things. That looks fantastic.
Yeah, so yeah, working with the kids who want to be artists when they grow up. So showing them that you can take the path of going to college, or you can take the path of just being your own boss, you know, whatever it is you want to do with your work.
That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and now Steens.
All right, hello, I am Steens. I am a cartoonist and professor and editor, and I did the book Archival Quality with my co-creator, Ivy Noel Weir. Here we go, nice spooky book. I also do a lot of other comics in anthologies like Deadbeats and Elements Fire and Mine, the Planned Parenthood benefit anthology. And I'm currently the artist on the syndicated comic strip Heart of the City, which you can read in newspapers as well as gocomics.com every single day. And I teach cartooning at Webster University in the fall, and I edit a lot of different things. I edit comics, I help people with their pitches, and I pretty much am like an advocate for learning in the comics industry. You know, one of the things that I definitely like to teach to not just my students, but also all of my editorial clients is, you know, drawing what you see, not what you think you see. And a lot of times that is, you know, drawing yourself how you look when you look in the mirror. which can be a very interesting project for a lot of creators for sure. So I'm trying to think why I'm on this panel.
Well, I can tell you why I contacted you because of that, because your work shows that you really think about how people look and how bodies are in a natural way. Even though it's, you're doing cartooning and comics and things like that, the bodies of your work show people, and I think in all kinds of, tall, small, fat, thin, none of those, they're just people, and it really shows that just, as an expression and a way to be in the world. And just you saying how you talk to your students and stuff really, I knew that's how you were, but that's so nice to hear. No, it's so nice to hear that, because, I don't think enough people are as active about that as they could be. I think there's sometimes a sort of passive idea about a lot of this stuff, like, well, it'll just happen. And I don't know that that's always the case, because we don't necessarily see those things. And I think taking that initiative and saying, like, it's okay to really look at what's around you and represent everything, that you see, and kind of question that too. That's really important.
Yeah, and I think you think about, like, who's reading comics, like when I am working on Heart of the City, I know that I've got, young readers who are sitting on their parents' living room floor and looking through the newspaper, but then I also know that I have an older audience on gocomics.com, and they've been reading the comic for years. But, no matter who is reading it, I want to make sure that what's on the page reflects real life. And that means showing different types of people, different types of bodies. And it can be exhausting to, like, get that across to, the team that you work with. But it's definitely worth it, because you want people to feel like they are seen and they're visible, even if they're like a background character.
That's, I think, some of the most important things about this. And one of the reasons why this panel was something I wanted to do is how important it is to feel seen. And it's not always about just like the main character or something, although that's really important. I think, that the world around you is also just full of different people and different bodies and different lives, and that's important too, and that we exist in these places. I think media has a lot of opportunity to do that and doesn't always embrace it the way that it could. And that's, I think I have seen more things doing that. And I think comics actually is very lucky because of the kind of medium it is. We have a lot of that. And we do have a lot of creators who do care about that and make that effort. But it's not always something that people understand how important it is, I think. At least from my perspective, like, it's something that I've been talking about for a lot of years, and it still comes up. People are like, well, does that really matter? I'm like, I think it really does. I think you find that if you ask people who don't feel represented in things how much it matters when they see themselves in some way, it suddenly becomes much more apparent. So on that note, what are things that I think that you guys feel like where you are feeling that, like in your own work, and any work of others that you've been seeing, things where you feel like projects, it doesn't have to be comics, it could be other stuff. Yeah, Mari, I think I see your hand.
So I'm almost 47, so I've been around for a while, and it's only very recently that it's been acceptable to portray Asian Americans as something other than a sidekick. I mean, this is very recent, and I don't know if it's a fad that's already passed, but to me, when that was happening, I mean, I was just in tears constantly, like watching Fresh Off the Boat, and like these things aren't geared at my age group or me as like a queer weirdo artist person, but even so, just seeing this and watching Crazy Rich Asians, which doesn't, I mean, that's not aimed at me at all, but like just seeing all these Asian people, like of all these various kinds, like I was just weeping uncontrollably, and I'm not like that. I mean, maybe I am. But I mean, it was just, it really, I didn't realize how much it meant to me until I suddenly had this world open up, and it was amazing.
Jules.
Hey, so I think like one of the biggest moments for me of just being seen, I feel number one, if you have the luxury to complain about privilege, you got too much privilege. Maybe stop talking. I don't often feel seen in media at all. I'm a Puerto Rican. what does that mean that most people are like, what is a Puerto Rico, right? So pretty much like the only time I feel myself represented these days, weirdly, yeah, there are a couple of shows here and there, like The Baker and the Beauty, you got a lot of really cool Latinas there doing stuff. Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I'm sorry, I got to cancel that show because it's about cops. Bye, defund the police. Also, I feel honestly the most represented, it's going to seem really weird, but, and maybe Lila might have some stuff to say about this, but I've been watching the second season of Pose on Netflix, and that's just like, wow. Because, okay, I'm not transgender, but I'm Puerto Rican, and a lot of the women on that show are Puerto Rican too, and you don't get to see my people at all in media unless we're like a really low-ranking bad guy. We don't even get to be like lieutenants or actual bad guys. No, we're just the little crappy low-ranking henchmen like, oh, I have a switchblade. So it's really great seeing, my people, my heritage, my hair texture, my colors on display. And yeah, like it's a wild and wide eye-opening experience. The people who get represented all the time, like, wow, this is what it's like. It's amazing.
Yeah, and then you get surprised by where you find it. Like I was watching Queer Eye, which I like to watch because I like to cry alone. But, there was an episode where it was about this, Black girl who didn't feel good in her own skin. And it was just like, it was weird to see someone who was so similar to me in a show that wasn't geared to, this is a show about representation. It's just like, well, let's help a little bit of everybody kind of show. And I don't know, it's nice to see it when it comes up and you don't expect it.
Word.
I'm curious if any of you ever have a fear, though, that the representation isn't going to be appropriate, authentic. So
if white people are making it, it's a given. You guys are not very good at representing my people. It's
right.
A given. I'm used to it by now. I'm like, whatever.
But yeah. I didn't watch Shrill, which a lot of fat women really loved, but I felt like I'm not ready. I'm not ready to, I have too much of a fear of being the butt of a joke, and just the assumption of like what you are describing, Jules and Mari, of like the sidekick or push aside, or like you don't get to be a fully fledged character if you're like the fat girl. And so I have heard great things, but I personally made the choice that like it's not for me yet. Maybe one day it will be, but I'm not there yet.
I had to get drunk before I watched Fresh Off the Boat because I was so afraid of what it was going to be like, and it was going to be another like 16 Candles or whatever. So I totally
gross. Yeah, thank God it's not. It's a great show.
So this is a very interesting question for me because while there has been more transgender representation in media over the past few years, and a lot of it has been really, really, really good, and Pose is a great example of that, there is an unfortunate confluence of things that has to do with conventional beauty standards in Hollywood and in life. So the transgender women that we see on television and in movies, like Laverne Cox, like Jen Richards, like all the women that are in Pose, they're all wonderful actresses. They're all really amazing people. They all have the same trait, which is that they are conventionally cisgender appearing trans women. And while this is unintentional, and certainly not a dig against them because they deserve to be working, lots of trans people do not pass as cisgender. And so when we are looking for representation in media, what we're presented with again and again is transgender women who are conventionally attractive and who look just like cisgender women. And that is really hard for me because I want all these people to succeed, but also I'm not seeing myself anyplace. And in my work, I've really had to push to get my transgender characters to look, to deviate from that look. Unfortunately, I've been able to sneak a couple in, and I've got a book coming out next year that I'm really proud of in that respect. But yeah, we still have a long way to go.
That's true. I think that's something that's, I think representation, especially with body and diversity and inclusion, is something that's always going to be an ongoing thing that we could be doing better with, because there are so many kinds of people. And I think that's something that when I look at at my own work, like I have a book that's coming out called Ash and Thorn, and I made the two main characters are older women. One is a Black woman, and she's an artist. She's 80, and she's the hero of the story. And the other woman is a British woman who looks to be in her 70s. She's probably more like 300 years old. But it was important to me when I came up with the characters, because I don't see that very often. It's not that they don't exist at all, but they just very rarely see older people, anybody over the age of like 25 or 30-ish, and a lot of media just are sort of not there, and they're certainly not important. They're sort of, maybe you might go to them for like some earthy wisdom, but like they're not the main character. And as I get older, I mean, I'm 41, I'm not old, but as I get older, the more I crave characters like that with different life experiences, and the more I see how limited those things and those representations were when I was younger. And the more, when I look at media, like I just, even if something technically represents me, so much does. Like I'm not hurting for representation as a white lady, so I get tired of that, because it's a perspective I've seen a lot, and it's not what I'm interested in seeing all the time. And it bothers me that that's still the assumption that that's all I want to see is just like myself completely perfectly represented, because I don't. And I want to see stories about other people and other experiences from those perspectives too. Like that's, I think, the other thing. Looking at a lot of conversations recently, a big problem that does happen is that not only are we not seeing it in the media itself, but the people telling the stories aren't from those perspectives. And that's, yeah, as Jules is
right there. I mean, just like 5 minutes ago, Disney announced a movie about, I don't know, some crap about Brazil. Not a single Brasileño on the entire credits list. And they just have these two white dudes saying, we're going to tell your story. And I'm like, I really don't think you know anything about what it's like to be Brazilian. I don't think you know what it's like to be Latin. You don't even know what it's like to be tan. Stop. Just stop. Every time I see that lazy crap, I'm just like, bye. Go away.
It makes me wonder, at what point do we start teaching this to people? Is this just something that we do as children, or is this something that we should feel like we should be doing as we work? Is it worth it to try and like get people who are like in power and older and just like have their eyes set on, a certain type of thing? I mean, I guess the answer is a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Simple, like, hi, executive, I'm taking your job one day.
I think you're right though, Christine. You've mentioned this a bunch in comics editing, how important this is, where we don't see this kind of thing, and that there's an assumption about people that they don't have experience that they do have, that everybody isn't necessarily coming in who needs everything explained to them. And at the same time that we do need to mentor people actively, and to, like, as an editor, it is my job to make sure that I am not just talking to the same creators all the time and being comfortable with that and not questioning why I'm doing that and why those are the same perspectives. Because there's a lot of that I think happens in comics, and some of it has to do with very practical things like people who meet deadlines and stuff, but it still makes a huge difference in what kind of stories are being told if you are not actively seeking out people with those experiences who have those stories. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are lazy about that. I think white people in general just don't think that way, which is our responsibility. It's not anybody else's responsibility to do that for us. Jules?
Sorry, I'm just being a dick about the whole lazy comment, because wow, this industry is lazy AF. It's true.
Yeah, and it's hard because you see it, and you know, as much as you see it and you catch it in yourself, hopefully, you know, we do have to watch out for it in each other, and it's something that I think people need to question more often and spend less time being defensive and more time acknowledging and working at being better. Because yes, you will make a mistake, but if you can see that and then not keep making that mistake and make the active decision to be better about that as you keep going, it will make a difference. But yes, I think too, it's, you know, I think about the things that I was told to read, you know, growing up, and it was like mostly white guy stories about white guys. And you look at that and you go, like, who does this really reflect? You know, and it limits things a lot. And some of that has improved in some places and some it really hasn't.
I'm really interested to hear about, because I know Sequoia, you were saying that you do this anthology that's all ages. Have you, excuse me, have you like noticed from your like readership if you have like younger readers who are like, oh my gosh, finally?
Oh yeah, definitely. And like, we try our best to try to include, you know, stuff from all over so that we can get that kind of more wholesome, all-inclusive feel. But it is still like challenging, even just getting Black creators to create comics and create work within the anthology. Like, we are pretty much fully represented in the LGBT sense, but still like lacking in other areas. I don't know if it's because we've naturally been like, you know, not encouraged to produce that kind of work or the kind of stories that, you know, we tell in Vagabond, or if it's just like not enough of us out there. But yeah, that's something that, yeah, even in the past 2 years, I've just been trying to reach out and say, like, how do we continue to be all inclusive and really truly include everyone?
That's great, though. That's especially for, I think, for younger people, like the earlier you can start, because comics isn't unless you grow up reading them, it's not a format that everybody necessarily takes to right away. But I think once you show people and you show people the potential to storytelling, you know, like Mari, you do a lot of autobio work too. And I think a lot of kids relate to that. When I've taught kids, I find that they want to talk about themselves. They want to talk about their experiences.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely like you see it and you want to do it. Like that's how I started. I came into comics very late in life, like late in life in my 20s. And it wasn't until I saw a story that was similar to mine. It was a Mary Fleener story, and it was very punk rock about this horrible roommate that she had, and it just kind of snapped in me. I was already a storyteller. I was already an artist, but I didn't have it. It never occurred to me to tell my own story or to make comics until I read this one thing, and I thought, I have stories like that, and I have funny stories. Like I could totally do that too. And I mean, all it takes is to read one thing that you connect with. For some people, for them to be given, what do you call it? Not apology, permission, to get permission to tell their own stories. And I feel like it's important, like as an editor or as any kind of gatekeeper, where to encourage, all you have to do is encourage one person or to reach out to one person and get them to try something new. And maybe it's not for them, or maybe it is, but once that story is out there, who knows? That seed has been planted for potentially hundreds of people. I mean, it's so important.
The idea that you like didn't consider it until you saw someone else doing it, or you felt that connection, is incredible, because I think it's also really important, which kind of ties kind of what into you were saying, Sequoia, is showing that these kinds of, you know, comic stories can be done about anything. You know, you always feel like you have to, like, when you create something, it has to be perfect. It's got to be like heavy, and it's got to tell like this really super like story that everybody needs to read. And it's like, it can, but we can also talk about like picking your nose, and we can talk about like accidentally buying the wrong toothpaste, and like doing those kinds of stories and putting yourself into it as a Black person or an Asian person or a trans person. That's going to get people to be like, oh my gosh, I can tell these kinds of normal ass stories too. You know, even though it's not like, you know, social justice.
Yeah,
story,
definitely normalizing it. Like, that's why I got into comics, is like, because I didn't see like artists doing that kind of stuff. And I was just like, is that weird? Like, like everyone was like superhero comments, or you got to draw manga. And I'm like, well, what if I just want to tell stories? Like, can I just do that? Like, you know, we're all human beings, so why not tell stories about ourselves? Yeah.
I find the older that I get, if I do crap wrong on purpose, people like that more. Or if I just talk about like, hey, let's talk about surfing. Like just making comics about surfing has inspired people. Like,
Well, it
just
is though.
being a
Seeing you
person
do
of
that,
color. Yeah.
those stories are awesome.
Yeah, just being a person of color doing things that aren't crappy stereotypes is a political act in itself.
I totally agree.
And there's also pushback that you get from decision makers who will often question why, you know, I'm sure you've all heard this, why do they have to be Black, or why do they have to be Asian? Or I had to push really hard to get this transgender character in a story that was not about her being transgender. And the pushback I kept getting was, why does she have to be transgender? And my response was always, why shouldn't she be transgender? Transgender people do all kinds of stuff. We don't just sit around having traumas all day. Like,
right? Thank you. Thank you. We don't sit around having traumas all day. That's a quote. Write it down.
I mean, honestly, people go to the grocery store and they go to the bathroom and they go, you know, like normal things. And that's, I think, showing just that, like, I definitely think that there's a tendency from not own voices of stories to kind of think you know what people want to hear or what the story should be about. And I think that's something that people like myself with an awful lot of privilege have to step back and shut up about, because there are plenty of people who have those stories in their own voices who can tell you what that story should be. It's not up to me to decide that for somebody else. And Sequoia, I'm really, like, when I was looking through the stuff that you've been doing, the fact that you do workshops with kids was one of the things that really stood out to me, because, you know, like, I have a 5-year-old, so I'm always sort of thinking about things from the mom point of view. But I also used to teach more when I was younger. And I just found kids were so enthusiastic about comics as a format. And, like, I remember a class I taught where, like, every other kid was telling stories about babies at a certain age because they all had like younger siblings, so they were just like obsessed with that. So every story was like baby banana and baby carrot and like baby shark, you know, like it was just like hilarious. Yeah. And they were all just like these goofy stories. And then there were these other ones as they got older, where closer to teenager, where they were a lot more like a bit more about struggling, like things that they were trying to figure out and just social moire type stuff. But I found that the comics format really freed them up a lot to talk about those things. Have you found that when you're working with kids?
Oh, definitely. Like just any sort of art outlet to get them, you know, involved and let them speak, because that's a lot of the things that everyone usually doesn't listen to kids because they're kids. But like when I give them that power to like tell stories and just speak about what they want to speak about, they do tend to like thrive a little bit better. Like naturally they do it. So like I'm doing a anthology with some high school kids next month. We run a program here in Cleveland called Artworks. And it's like a high school college readiness, like entrepreneurial thing program, and they get paid to be there. They get paid to make art. But I kind of, when I'm teaching them, I kind of give them kind of free reign as if they were running their own business or their own kind of art form. So we're actually going to be doing an issue about the Black Lives Matter movement. And that was something actually that they called me and they were like, I know we haven't met yet, but this is what our anthology is going to be about. And I'm like, excellent. Like, I will help you put it together. I'll give you anything you need to make this happen. So
that's incredible. That just is the kind of thing that I think comics has a real power to do because of the medium. And that just makes that makes my heart happy, because I think the more we can help kids express themselves that way, I think the better chance we have of making these ongoing changes, making these things like solid, not just like a brief shift, but like a real solid ongoing change, which is the thing I'm looking at a lot with some of the things that have been going on just this week, unfortunately, in comics, is how much these things just keep happening through the repeating patterns of this stuff. And that's something that really worries me, and how much younger creators are targeted. That's really upsetting to me, because, you know, we're talking about teenagers, we're talking about, you know, young adults, and that's not how this should be. And I do think it factors into body image, because I think the way that we discount anybody without a certain perspective, and they're not seen as human in the same way, and we don't value their stories, I think that factors into the industry, and I think that factors into how people are treated and what stories and people are valued, and it just keeps coming back up, and it's something that has to be a fundamental change. So I think what you're doing is amazing. not that you asked, but I think it's incredible. I think that sounds really, really fantastic.
Yeah,
Has anybody
keep
else
the
been
hope going.
yeah. Has anybody else been doing work with kids and stuff on that? Because I know it's something that I personally think about a lot, but it doesn't have to be. But yeah, Mari?
I'm terrified of children. I always have been as a child and as an adult. And when I started making these young adult books about over 10 years ago is when I started, it didn't occur to me that when I was done, I would have to interact with children. So I recently, by recently I mean in the last couple of years, like 3 years ago, oh gosh, I was touring with Losing the Girl, and I did this book, which is actually supposed to be for 14 and over, but I did a workshop with these kids in the Bronx, and I was terrified, because again, children terrify me, and it was actually a large range of kids. I think the youngest was maybe 9 and the oldest was 17 or 18, and the whole time I was just sweating bullets, and these kids were, I don't think they were there to see me. I think they were there because they were handing out lunch too, but they were just like these adorable people that I didn't know how to talk to. And at the end of and I led a workshop where I was just basically, let's draw a story about your life. And some people just, you know, wanted to draw a little demon, and other people were telling stories about their lives. And it was mostly pleasant, except for my anxiety. But at the end, the librarian, who was basically, you know, the person who was leading this all, and I was just there and telling them to shush and stuff like that. She's like, you know, this is the author of these books. And suddenly all the kids, like, their eyes popped out. They stopped being all cool, and they just like, they were so standoffish before, but suddenly I was getting hugged by all these children, and it was so beautiful and horrifying, and I'm still even more scared of kids, but it was a beautiful experience that I'll hopefully never have again, but I'm really glad I had it.
It does take some getting used to.
It's really easy to impress kids. Look, here's my trick on how to get kids to like me. It's a good trick. I'm a one-trick pony, but it's a damn good trick. What's your favorite cartoon character, kiddo? What is that? Draw it out for them. Boom, you got them for life. Life. How often do you think a kid walks around and then one day an adult is like, let me draw your favorite cartoon character? And then they do. That's huge power. So yeah, start doing that. You'll get them.
Oh yeah. Like my thing is, I will just say the most ridiculous thing that pops into my head, and usually they're just so boggled by it that they also come to like me. They're like, you know what she said to me today? Something about a plastic bag, and I'm like, I don't know, but you know, it works. Like it does take used to getting kids. Yeah.
It does, but you know, like Jules met my daughter a few months ago, and my daughter still talks about her friend Jules with green hair. You know, she made an impression just with that alone, like just being an adult who isn't afraid to look a little different or just like talk to them just like they're another person. I have found that often with kids, like they just appreciate not being talked down to, even little guys.
Yeah.
Andrea.
Honestly, she's such a little girl, so all I did was just let her be and do her thing. And, you know, sometimes she would show up and like tap my hair because she was I could tell she was fascinated with the color of it. But I was just like, okay, you do you. Like, I just let her be herself. And yeah, I guess that made a good impression. I don't know.
It did.
That's all you can do, really.
I've actually found the same is pretty true with adults too.
John's your favorite character?
Well, maybe not that. Maybe. But just working with the women that I have for subjective line weight, most of them, I mean, Lila and Mariah are exceptions. Most of them are not writers. They're not comics writers. They're just people. And having the opportunity to share a story is cathartic and is rewarding and is like so important to reinforce your sense of self, especially if it's talking about something about your body that you didn't realize, oh wow, other people are feeling this way. Other people have had similar experiences. I'm not just like this alien ogre who, you know, everybody thinks looks weird. Oh, turns out I'm just another person. And that can be so essential for kids, but also, you know, for as many adults as we can give that opportunity to as well.
Yeah, I do think, Lila, you go first.
Okay, talking to kids about this stuff is so important because they do not have those preconceived notions. And one of my favorite things that ever happened to me was I was out doing a book tour and I was in San Francisco and I realized that I was going to be talking to a room full of 7th graders at the last period of the day. And so I was a little concerned and I was going in there and I was like, my talk, you know, and I was talking to the assistant principal as I walk in, I'm like, my talk talks about me being transgender. Is that going to be a problem? And she goes, oh, honey, this is San Francisco. You can talk about whatever you want. So I walk into the place and I'm doing my spiel, and so I'm like, are there any questions? And this one boy raises his hand and he goes, so if you're transgender, and I'm like, oh boy, this could go a lot of ways. And he goes, what bathroom do you use? And I said, well, I'm a woman, so I use the girls' room. And he goes, that's what I thought. And that was it. And all the kids were just completely fine. And no one had any issues. There was no one ran screaming out of the room like they met a transgender person and nobody died.
Yeah, I think
That's
it's
the
like,
best you can hope for.
it really is. It really is. And I just like, I think that what Andrea was saying about how adults as well want to be seen, I think a part of that comes from being kind of embarrassed about not having the answers for things, you know? Like I have found that, now this is not entirely the same, but I have found that most people, when they're trying to like draw a Black person's hair for the first time, they don't, because they're too scared, you know, and they don't really know where to begin. And so I always tell people like, you know, if you don't know what you're doing or you have questions about things, you can use Google on incognito mode if you're really afraid of what people are going to think about your search results. But like, I really do think that adults as well need to start getting over that, like, oh, I shouldn't even ask these questions, you know?
Yeah. I think a lot of people are afraid of being wrong or of not knowing things. And, you know, yeah, and the truth is you might annoy somebody if you ask them. I mean, you might. But because, you know, people get a lot of questions that they're tired of answering, and that's completely, you know, fair. But at the same time, you know, I think you have to, it's again that defensiveness thing too, of like, well, I'm wrong or I didn't know something. And I think your life in general gets a lot better if you realize you don't know everything. You might and almost definitely are wrong about something. And, you know, to do a lot of the work yourself. And if you really don't know, it is okay to reach out and ask. But, you know, check in with people and make sure it's okay. You know, that's, you know, because there's, you know, I think right now there's a lot of trauma and a lot of difficulties and a lot of things going on. For anybody who sees this a month from now, hopefully they know, you know, what's going on in the world. But, you know, there are a lot of places to look too, you know. God, I don't even want to know what a month from now is going to look like. I made a horrible joke about like a meteor hitting, and then I realized like it's 2020 and that could actually happen.
We already have 8 giant murder hornets in North America, and
I know.
And the coronavirus and the uprisings. It's not fair to call them riots. It's citizen uprisings. We tried to protest the right way. Y'all didn't listen. Now we start burning things. Now we got people's attention. Okay, uprising.
Yeah. Revolution.
Yes.
You know, it's
Crazy next month.
way past time, and I think you know, when I look at the things going on, like I'm in LA, where there's, you know, a lot that needs to change here, and about the best thing I can say out of it, out of all the pain and awful things, is that I am glad that more people are aware of the systemic problems than I think they were, especially in the different systems here, and there is more active involvement. People are taking a look at that. You know, but that's, you know, when I was really debating whether to do this panel during this time, because I thought, well, it's a body talk, body images might not be the best time to have this, but I think actually it's exactly the time to talk about this, because we are seeing an awful lot of these things in media, and it matters. You know, again, representation and how people have been seen, how stories have been told, whose stories have been told and prioritized, has a huge impact on what people believe, what they think is going on versus what is actually going on. And that's something that, you know, we have to keep fighting and pushing for that, because things don't change without it. They just don't. Nothing ever changes through a passive means. Like, it just doesn't. And I think, what was that, Jules?
I said, I got nothing but time. We'll do this. I'm fighting my whole life. What's the rest of my life? Let's do this. Come on.
Well, I think as storytellers, that's a big thing. I mean, I know when I tell stories, it is to convey something, you know, whether it's a personal story or it's something else. I am trying to say something. And I think that's true of everybody. And that, you know, that can be from a casual, just, hey, my life is just, today I went and did this thing, to, you know, epic, you know, whatever's. But I don't think any of those stories have more value than another. And I think it's just about all of those stories mattering, and the people behind and in those stories and in real life. Because I think sometimes there's a tendency to sort of view everything from that story lens, and, like, you know, real human beings are people. It's not just a story that's happening, it's their lives. And that's, you know, that's part of what the representation of things kind of means. You know, we're looking for ourselves in that, and I think other people are looking for that as well. I think, you know, I know I am, but I'm also trying to be more aware of what I'm not seeing, you know, and that it's easy, if I'm just seeing myself, to forget how much I'm not and who is not included. And I think that's, you know, more important ultimately. You can hear my child giggling in the background, sorry. I think that's actually about our time. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to say? Books that you've got that you'd like to, you wanna, Jules, you got yours?
Yeah. I being an asshole again. Okay.
No.
Again, Love Jules, Tidal Wave Queen. I also have another Love Jules book out, but this is the latest one, Tidal Wave Queen. I did start a revolution with my ass. See how I did that? Also out by Turner Publishing, Spectre Deep 6. I'm the artist on this book. I did some co-writing too, but it's about ghost agents who are literally ghosts. Scary ghost stuff. It's amazing. Go get it. Next.
That's awesome.
I'll go next. Like I said, Vagabond Comics is available. This is issue 12. We put out an issue like twice a year. You can get this one as well as all the other ones on our website at vagabondcomics.storymv.com. And if you want to pick up this, I only have a few of these left. There's crap books on my website.
And where can people find you? Can they find you online, like Twitter? Anybody wants to?
Yeah. So pretty much at Sequoia Bostic Illustration, pretty much everywhere.
Awesome. And Jules, I know you're also on Twitter. All right, Steens, how about you? Oh, there you go.
I'm at julesrivera.com. I'm at Jules Rivera on Twitter. If you find me on TikTok, I'm Love Jules.
There you go.
Let's see. You can find me at Oh Hey Steens on everything. That's 1H. And honestly, just read Heart of the City every day. Because I draw it every day. So I would like people to read it.
It's lovely. And by the way, really, congratulations on that again. That's a big deal, doing a daily, that's a huge thing.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Mari, how about you?
If you look me up on Mari Naomi Art on Instagram, but I'm on Twitter. I've got marinaomi.com. What I really want you to do is look at my databases, which are connected to my website, but Cartoonists of Color, queercartoonist.com, and disabledcartoonist.com. Color does not have a U because I'm American. And also look at my books because I have a lot of them. And but you know, just read comics. Yeah.
Andrea, how about you?
I'm AndreaShockling.com, at Andrea Shockling on Twitter, on Instagram, all places, very easy to find. And almost all of Subjective Line Weight is available online for free. So read it and see for yourself how some of these stories are so, you know, have been so empowering for the women that shared them, and, you know, maybe see yourself in some of the stories as well.
Hey, pictures. And Lila. Lovely Lila.
Yes, I am Lila Sturgis. My Twitter is just my name, Lila Sturgis.
About Twitter. Oh, yeah.
And I just want to say that it's so important that we support Black trans women now and all the time. There are lots of ways to do that, and you can Google them. Black trans women are among the most vulnerable people in our society right now, and they can always use our support. So that's my spiel.
Thank you, Lila. And I'm Mariah McCourt. You can find me on, I tweet way too much. I'm there under Tired Farrier, my name. I am on Instagram under Monster Tea Time, where I mostly post silly sketches of things that I do. And my next book that's coming out, well, right now there's an anthology out called Insider Art, which, yeah, Andrea, Lila, and Sequoia are part of. And it's a benefit book. All proceeds go to help female non-binary retailers who have been impacted by the pandemic, which has really hurt the industry quite a bit. It's a 250 plus page anthology. We put it together in 3 months. We're a little tired, with over 150 contributors. And it's an all ages book with crafts, recipes, stories, comics, prose, art, a lot of cats, all kinds of stuff. So it's you know, it's $10 on Gumroad right now. But if that's too much, you can always pay a little bit less. We wanted to make sure that people had options to contribute who don't necessarily have, I know, like, I have a pretty tight budget right now. So yeah, that's me. And thank you everybody for this panel. I didn't miss anybody, did I? Is everybody?
No,
Okay.
I think we got it.
Yay. All right. Thanks everybody. And thank you,
Thank
Comic-Con
you.
at Home. There's
Shit.
Jewel.
More time, just in case there's like a little panel, like,
Wait, hold it up one more time. Okay, I want to make sure I can find you on
There you go.
Instagram.
There she is, Space Queen.
Awesome. Can I post the
Thank you,
screenshot
everybody.
of this story in my Instagram stories? Is that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Thanks, you guys.
Awesome.
All right, hold on. I'm just going to stop this recording.